to another special episode of Global Trade Show. I'm your host, Lawrence McDonald. Today, I've got the absolute pleasure to speak to Mike Gallacher, CEO of Ports Australia, here in your office in Sydney. Mike, always great to see you.
Great to see you, Lawrence. Great to see you again.
No, likewise, thank you. Mike, so much has been happening globally. You're such a busy man, and ports are such a vital part of the Australian economy. Tell us a bit of an overview of what's happening with ports across Australia for 2025.
Well, clearly as the enablers of trade, we're very conscious of what's happening globally, let alone what's happening in the domestic environment. We've got an election coming up shortly, which could well change the direction that the government and indeed the country travels on a whole host of issues. Equally, we see these tectonic shifts happening globally, the US, what's happening in Europe. This all has an impact on us. It has an impact on us in terms of trade, but it also has an impact on us in terms of our future investment, where our resources are going, where they're likely to go. Are there markets that are going to be impacted by tariff discussions that are coming out of the US? There's a whole lot happening in our space. The good news is, of all of this, Australian ports are investing into the future. They really are. They've all got plans, recognising the growth that is happening in the commodities, growth that's happening in the domestic environment, so demand is increasing. So all of our ports, whether they're resource focused or indeed capital city ports looking at containerisation primarily, all positively looking to the future. So I think we're in a really good place. It's just that there are these other issues that are important to us that right now we can't quite see exactly where they're going to land. Things like decarbonisation, critical infrastructure protection, et cetera, et cetera.
A lot of variables.
Yeah, there are a lot of variables requiring a lot of investment. And what the port sector will look for is greater certainty and financial assistance from government before those investments are made.
Mike, let's talk about the State of Trade report actually just behind us here. I'm sure you've touched on a couple of those points, but essentially the industry looks towards this type of document to really navigate what's going to take place now and into the future. Can you give us a bit of a quick overview of what the contents are of the State of Trade report?
Yeah, look, this report we think is incredibly valuable to the wider community, most certainly to government, but also to other industries around the nation. The unique situation that we find ourselves, and we've all seen it, Lawrence, whether it's the car industry, whether it's the agricultural farming community, whether it's the resources sector, they all put a report out every year or every couple of years detailing the investment and how important they are to the economy. And they are all important in their own right. We are the only industry that can look at the whole lot of them together in one place in one time. So we're looking at agriculture, we're looking at household goods, we're looking at imports, exports. Forever now, we will no longer have to say that ports are responsible for enabling 99% of all of Australia's trade. We can now tell you it's in excess of $650 billion worth of trade. We can show you which states are doing the heavy lifting so far as exports are concerned, and which ones are doing the heavy lifting when it comes to imports, the types of commodities that are coming in and out of the country. We're really confident that this document, the first of its kind, I've got to say, will be a document for the future that we will invest into in future iterations to ensure that we can map the changes in the Australian economy, both in terms of imports and exports. This document shows you the numbers of jobs that are facilitated through the work of ports, how lean the port sector is in terms of jobs, how small the number of people are in the port sector, but how many people rely on port jobs or the port work for their jobs in retail, in resources, in agriculture, right across the Australian economy. It's a great report. Yeah. It really is such that BITRA and the federal government departments have picked it up. Last week I had the honour of speaking to AMSA, the AMSA board, on this report. So it has currency, it has relevancy, and there's nothing like it anywhere else in the country.
Wow. It's really impressive, and as a great segue, because you talked about the first of its kind, that's another good thing that Ports Australia is doing around the ESG. And can you talk about some of the reporting initiatives that you're actually driving here?
Look, our ports are really at the cutting edge of wanting to work with governments and the community to ensure that our reporting on ESG, on emissions, is as close as we can get it with the current parameters that apply to the country. We all understand the ambitious goals of net zero and what that means, but of course, ports play a pivotal role between rail and road and shipping, and they, of course, bring with those modes of transport those challenges to our sector. So Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions are a lot easier for ports to be able to measure and to be able to report on, but it's Scope 3 that really posed a challenge for us. So what we wanted to do as an organisation was assist our members right around the country by seeing what was in place globally that we could lift off the shelf and say, let's have a look at this and see if it can apply to us. Well, the work that was done by an outside consultant that we brought in who specialises in this work found that there was no off-the-shelf model. There was no other national organisation like Ports Australia anywhere in the world that had prepared a guideline document to assist its members in measuring Scope 1, 2 and 3 and therefore the reporting of it. So we had to do it ourselves. And that was a challenge. So we brought together all of our environment and sustainability experts from right around the country. We brought them together and we worked on this model. We worked on the development of this guideline document. And I'm pleased to say it, again, is the first of its kind globally. And it's actually been released even to the International Association of Ports and Harbours. And I've released it to other industry associations in the port sector globally to ensure that they have access to this document. The good thing about it is that it could equally apply anywhere in the world, but it not be limited, doesn't necessarily have to be limited just to the port sector. It could apply to road and rail, shipping, all those that intersect with ports. So they could all work on an understanding of what is the model that ports are using, what are the guideline documents that we are using, and then try to shape their approach to it as well. At the end of the day, it's all about ensuring that ports who are good societal members of local communities are very much part of that interaction with the community to ensure that there's transparency on our reporting.
Well, it's fantastic that you're sharing that globally. It must be well received, I'm assuming, as well.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's like everything. People will always look at it as a bit as somewhat skeptical to start with until they actually look at the quality of the work that's in that report. The feedback that I've received has been very positive, such that the International Association have asked me to speak to it in the coming weeks on a global hookup. Again, it's all about sharing knowledge in our sector. Whether it's the State of Trade report, sharing that knowledge with the wider community, with government to understand the magnitude of what comes in and out through the maritime supply chain, or alternatively, sharing this experience on reporting, particularly Scope 3, but Scope 1 and 2, to ensure that we're all doing the best that we can to reduce the emissions into our environment.
Wow. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Mike, we talk about reducing emissions. One of the, I suppose not unforeseen, but one of the byproducts of all the new sustainability, the EV vehicles and some of the battery problems that the maritime sector is facing. Tell us a bit about what Ports Australia how do you face that challenge? What are you doing about it?
It actually started for us with the accident in Baltimore when the vessel hit the bridge in Baltimore.
Right.
And we were at the time having a discussion with our port operations experts. These are all of our harbour masters, all master mariners who are members of the Ports Australia community. And we were talking about Baltimore and what other risks were on the horizon for us as a maritime nation. And it then spilled into this discussion about EV fires, and increasingly experience around the table, more and more people were talking about their experience with fires either on vessels or on land, which then caused us to delve into it a bit more. And last September, we held a workshop in Brisbane where we brought together fire and rescue personnel from Western Australia and Queensland, our first responders, to better understand how they would approach a fire of this magnitude. But we also brought all of our operational port people with us as well to understand how they would approach a fire, both from a maritime perspective, but then also on land. And there's different there's different experiences and different approaches. We were very fortunate to have with us a recognised international investigator who specialises in EV fires. And what he brought was that experience and that knowledge that quite simply we just don't have here, born out of him investigating these fires internationally. The reality, of course, was that the approach that fire and rescue were taking, both from Queensland and Western Australia, whilst it was the proper approach dealing with a fire that was occurring in isolation on land, be it a car, be it on a truck, what had not really been considered was a fire on board a vessel in a harbour in a completely foreign environment for these firefighters. And our concern, of course, was about their safety, first and foremost, the safety of our workers, but then, of course, the potential environmental disaster that could occur. And it's from there that the conversation has continued to expand. Now, AMSA has done some work, which is excellent. AMSA also were in attendance at our conference. And in fact, last week when I spoke to AMSA, I again raised the need for us to do more work in this space. In the last week, there was a fire off the United Kingdom with a car carrier. But it's not just cars. People automatically will think cars, but more and more scooters coming here, bikes, just the batteries themselves. I mean, a normal car fire, a traditional car fire, fuel fire runs at about 300 degrees Celsius. My understanding is that an EV fire runs at about 2,500 degrees Celsius. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with a vessel that's on fire? Some big questions for us.
It's a whole new type of DG approach as well with that.
Yeah, look, and the reality is, from what I understand at this stage, they're having troubles right around the world, right? They're having problems right around the world in dealing with settling on an agreed methodology in dealing with these fires. So Lawrence, what we need is, not just here in Australia, but internationally, an agreed methodology in terms of how we deal with these fires.
Can we expand on that? What do you mean by the methodology?
Well, it's not going to be port personnel that are going to be rushing, carrying the hoses towards these vessels with vehicles on fire. Our number one priority is obviously looking after those seafarers and getting them off, whether they be either alongside or indeed in the harbour. The second is going to be our firefighters. How do we get them safely to a position where they can actually fight the fire in such cramped quarters inside a vessel? Is the approach simply going to be let the thing burn to the water? Then what does that mean for the environmental disaster that potentially could happen as well? So there's all these questions that really do need to be asked and need to be answered, but it needs to be done not just here in little old Australia, it's got to be done internationally. I think this one is a global approach because the pardon the pun, explosion in the take-up of batteries. I mean, they're talking somewhere in the vicinity of a 1 to 2 kilo battery found on an electric bike or electric scooter produces somewhere about 2,000 to 3,000 litres of toxic fumes, right? I've seen the footage and the toxic fumes are deadly. If you're caught in a closed environment, such as a bedroom or a lift, and you can't get out, you're gone. Right? But the long-term health impacts for firefighters, seafarers and others who are dealing with these needs to be better understood.
Mike, tell us about, I mean, we're just in March now. It's been a rapid start to 2025, as it always is. What excites you the most this year for your role and what have you got in store for 2025?
Well, personally, in this organisation, I've got a new team.
Okay.
And I'm really excited about the new team. They bring with them all new perspectives. And I think that's going to be a telling factor in the development of Ports Australia. I honestly feel this year you'll see this organisation lift to another level. We're focusing in on our members in a greater way than we've done in the past because we now have additional resources to be able to do it. We've always wanted to, but now we can. And it's about making sure that we start to tell their stories because each and every one of our organisations are involved in fantastic things, but it's being in a position to help them tell their stories, to educate the community, educate government, everybody else, just what a wonderful job our port sector is doing facilitating trade. I think that to me is one of the real exciting things internally. I mean, we've got a conference coming up in early September in Gladstone, which is about business operations. So it's about capturing all of those operational opportunities and challenges that exist. We'll start off obviously with safety, because safety is paramount for us. But we'll look at things like cybersecurity. We'll look at a whole host of things in that engineering space and environmental space. We're in the process now where we've gone out to the wider community asking for their feedback in terms of their participation, because we want to ensure that those people who are investing in innovation and have really good ideas and are seeing great results, it's about sharing it.
Yeah, fantastic. I love always speaking to you. You're such a strong leader when it comes to all these ports. And as you said, they've got all different roles that they play right across, pretty much every industry, really. There's not one industry that
totally
is not impacted by the ports.
Yeah.
So it's such an important role. And even more so as the elections take place, governments, all these type of things, they rely on you and your team to really be that conduit between government, industry, and all the other stakeholders. So congratulations.
Well, thank you for that. I mean, the creation of the Parliamentary Friends of Ports at a federal level, we subscribe to the view that every port has a postcode, every postcode has a member of Parliament. Our job's to bring them together, for them to understand the work that's being done. And in regional areas, it's well known by local MPs. They know the importance of their local port and the resources and that supply chain. But in capital cities, sometimes gets blurred. So what we want to try to do is continue to ensure that our federal members of Parliament are closer to the port sector, they understand us, and become our champions in their respective party rooms.
Yeah, well done. Well, thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with me, Mike.
Thank you, mate.
All the best and congratulations again. We'll stay in touch and hopefully get another episode later in the year.
Lawrence, it'd be great to be able to recount with you the success of 25.
Look forward to it.
Good on you, mate. Thank you.
Cheers.